You know what got me thinking about this? I was at an antique shop about 3 years ago, and I found a walnut side table that the dealer said was built sometime around 1840. No price tag yet, just sitting in the back. I picked it up, flipped it over, and every joint was still tight. No wobble, no cracks, no separation anywhere. This thing had survived 180 years of use, probably moved across the country at least once, and it was still solid. Then I went home and looked at a bookshelf I had built maybe 5 years earlier, and one of the shelves was already sagging, and a pocket hole joint on the side had started to pull apart. That was my wake-up call. I started studying how those old pioneer craftsmen actually built things, and what I found made me embarrassed about some of my own habits. Today, I am going to walk you through 10 things most modern carpenters do that would make a pioneer laugh out loud. And stick around to the end because I have got a layout trick from the homestead era that completely changed how I approach mortise and tenon joints. Let me show you what I learned. Here is the thing about pioneer woodworking that most of us overlook. These were not hobbyists. These were people settling the American frontier from roughly the 1700s through the late 1800s. And when they built a table or a bed frame or a chest, it had to last. There was no driving to the furniture store for a replacement. There was no next-day delivery. If your chair broke, you either fixed it or you sat on the ground. And they were working with hand tools, often a limited set. A draw knife, a frame saw, a brace and bit, a mortise chisel, and a hand plane. That was the whole shop for a lot of these folks. The wood came from their own land: white oak, black walnut, yellow poplar, eastern white pine, hickory, whatever was growing nearby. They air-dried it themselves, sometimes for a year or more. And because every board represented real labor, real-time felling and splitting and hauling, they did not waste it on sloppy technique. I have spent time at living history museums watching interpreters work with these same tools and these same methods, and I have examined dozens of surviving pioneer pieces in private collections. The craftsmanship is not fancy. You will not see ornate carvings or exotic veneers, but the joinery is dead solid, and the wood selection is thoughtful in ways that most of us never even consider. So let me walk you through the 10 modern habits that these old-timers would find absolutely baffling. The first one is pocket holes. Now look, I own a pocket hole jig. I have used it plenty. But if a pioneer craftsman watched you drill an angled hole through the end grain of a pine board and drive a self-tapping screw into the face grain of another board and call that a joint, he would not know whether to laugh or cry. Here is the problem. Pocket holes rely entirely on the screw's grip in the receiving board. End grain does not hold screws well. The fibers just push apart over time, and seasonal wood movement works against that connection with every cycle of humidity. A pioneer would cut a mortise and tenon for that same connection, and that joint is held together by the wood itself, by the mechanical interlock of one piece seated inside another. I have seen pioneer mortise and tenon joints that are still snug after 150 years. I have never seen a pocket hole joint that was still tight after 15. The second thing is glue. Modern woodworkers use glue like it is the answer to everything. If the joint is a little sloppy, add more glue. If the board is a little short, glue on an extension. We treat yellow glue like it is structural insurance, but pioneer craftsmen used hide glue sparingly, and only where it made sense. They understood that a joint should hold together dry. The glue was just a helper, not the hero. When you rely on glue to compensate for a poorly fitted joint, you are building in a failure point. Glue does not fill gaps well. It has almost no shear strength in a thick glue line, and over time, especially with wood movement, that gluey mess inside a loose joint starts to crack and let go. A pioneer would be confused by the idea of squeezing out puddles of glue from every joint on a project. He would look at that and think, why did you not just cut it to fit? By the way, if you are enjoying learning about these old-world methods, I put together something I think you will really appreciate. It is called The Old Ways, and it is a collection of 100 forgotten woodworking secrets from traditional craftsmen around the world. Techniques like the ones we are covering today, and a whole lot more. You can grab your copy by scanning the QR code on screen, or just use the first link in the description. All right, let us keep going. The third habit is ignoring wood movement. This is the big one, and honestly, it is the mistake I see more than any other in modern furniture building. Wood moves. It expands across the grain when humidity rises, and it shrinks when the air dries out. A wide white oak panel can move a quarter-inch or more across its width over the course of a year. Pioneer builders knew this because they watched it happen in their own homes. That is why they used breadboard ends with elongated holes. That is why they attached tabletops with wooden buttons that allow the top to slide. That is why drawer bottoms floated in grooves instead of being glued in place. Modern builders glue a solid wood top to a rigid apron frame and then act surprised when it cracks down the middle in February. A pioneer would look at that and know exactly what went wrong before you even told him. Number 4 is using big box lumber without acclimating it. Most of us grab a stack of boards from the home center, bring them home, and start cutting the same afternoon. Those boards were kiln-dried to somewhere around 6 to 8% moisture, then stored in an open warehouse where they picked up moisture, and now they are sitting in your shop at who knows what moisture content. A pioneer would never build with wood that had not reached equilibrium with the air around it. They air-dried their lumber for months, sometimes over a year for thicker stock, stacked with spacers so air could circulate around every board. If you are not letting your lumber sit in your shop for at least 2 weeks before milling it, you are building in stress that will show up later as warping, cupping, and joints that open up for no apparent reason. The fifth one is building with plywood and calling it furniture. Now, I am not against plywood. It has real advantages for certain applications. But when you build an entire bookcase out of 3/4-inch birch plywood, edge-band it, and call it a family heirloom, a pioneer would be puzzled. Plywood is a sheet good made for construction. It is dimensionally stable, which is great, but it does not age the way solid wood does. It does not develop character. And when it gets damaged, when a veneer chips or a corner delaminates, it looks terrible, and there is no repairing it gracefully. Pioneer furniture was solid wood, chosen for specific properties. White oak for strength, walnut for beauty, poplar for interior parts where it would not be seen. Each species was selected for a purpose, and the result was furniture that could be refinished, repaired, and handed down. Number 6 is skipping the finish on hidden surfaces. I did this for years. I would carefully finish the top, the sides, the front, and then leave the underside and the back raw. It saved time and materials. But what a pioneer understood, and what I learned the hard way, is that moisture enters unfinished wood much faster than finished wood. When you finish only one side of a tabletop, moisture uptake becomes uneven. The unfinished side absorbs and releases moisture faster than the finished side, and that imbalance is what causes cupping and warping. Pioneer craftsmen applied finish to every surface, including the bottom and the back. It did not have to be a fancy finish. A coat of linseed oil on the underside was enough. But they sealed it because they knew the wood needed balanced protection. The seventh habit is relying on screws where they do not belong. Modern builders use screws for everything: shelf cleats, face frames, drawer joints, you name it. But screws in solid wood have a fundamental problem. The wood moves and the screw does not. Over time, the screw hole elongates, the grip loosens, and the joint fails. Pioneer craftsmen used wooden pegs, drawboard tenons, and wedged joints. A drawboard tenon, where the peg hole in the tenon is offset slightly from the hole in the mortise, so the peg pulls the joint tight, creates a mechanical lock that actually gets tighter as the wood dries. I have pulled apart drawboard joints in antique furniture that required serious effort to separate after over a century. Try that with a drywall screw. Number 8 is sanding instead of planing. Most of us reach for the random orbit sander as our primary surface preparation tool. We sand to 150, then 180, then 220, creating dust and spending an hour on a single panel. A pioneer finished his surfaces with a hand plane. A sharp smoothing plane leaves a surface that is actually flatter and more reflective than a sanded surface because it cuts the wood fibers cleanly instead of tearing and scratching them. Sanding creates tiny grooves that scatter light. A planed surface reflects it. If you have never felt a board straight off a sharp hand plane, you owe it to yourself to try it. The difference is immediate and obvious. The ninth thing is building everything perfectly square and rigid. This sounds wrong, I know. We are taught that square means correct. But pioneer builders understood that a little flexibility in a structure is a good thing. They used slightly tapered tenons. They allowed chairs to flex under load. Timber frame barns were built with joints that could absorb racking forces from wind without cracking. A perfectly rigid joint in a perfectly rigid frame has nowhere to go when stress is applied. It cracks. A joint with a tiny amount of give distributes that stress and survives. This is the same principle that makes a wooden ship work, and it is something most modern woodworkers have completely forgotten. And the 10th thing, and this is really the root of all the other 9, is treating furniture like it is disposable. We live in a culture where a bookshelf is expected to last maybe 10 years. We build accordingly. Quick joints, fast materials, minimal finishing. A pioneer built a blanket chest expecting his grandchildren to use it. That mindset changes everything. When you build expecting the piece to last 100 years, you slow down. You choose better wood. You cut better joints. You finish every surface. You account for movement. You build it right. And the irony is, it does not actually take that much more time. It takes more thought, but not more time. Now for that bonus tip I promised at the beginning. This one comes from watching a timber framing demonstration at a living history site in Virginia, and I have never seen it mentioned in any modern woodworking book. Before laying out a mortise and tenon, the old craftsman would study the grain runout on the tenon piece by running his thumbnail along the surface and feeling which direction the fibers lifted. He would then orient the tenon so that the grain runout ran toward the shoulder, not away from it. The reason is simple. When the tenon is inserted and the joint is stressed, grain that runs toward the shoulder compresses into the joint, making it tighter. Grain that runs away from the shoulder wants to peel up and lift, weakening the cheek. He could read this by touch alone in about 5 seconds. I started doing this about 2 years ago on every mortise and tenon joint I cut, and I have noticed a genuine improvement in how tight my joints pull together. It is a small thing, the kind of quiet, practical wisdom that never makes it into a YouTube thumbnail, but it makes your work better one joint at a time. One more thing before I let you go. I spent a long time gathering the best traditional woodworking methods I have come across, and I put them all into a book called The Old Ways. 100 techniques that most modern woodworkers have never seen, with step-by-step photos and clear explanations you can actually follow in your shop. Scan the QR code on screen right now, or grab it from the first link in the description. I appreciate you watching, and if you want more of these deep dives, make sure to subscribe. I will see you in the next one.